Hello, you guys. This is Andrea, your host with From Mrs. to Ms. We have a special treat today. We have Dr. Charlynn Ruan in the house with us today. And she's a licensed clinical psychologist that is dedicated to creating a safe and empowering space for women to heal, grow, and thrive. She's a CEO and founder of a large group practice called Thrive Psychology Group. Dr. Ruan combines her expertise in trauma recovery, post-traumatic growth, mind-body connection, personal, professional development, parenting, relationships, and the list goes on and on. Welcome to my show. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. I was going through your website and I am shocked. You cover everything. I'm like, I don't even know how you know so many different topics to go over. I had to kind of narrow it down to figure out what we wanted to talk about today, because you pretty much cover a vast amount of area there. So let's just start at the beginning. How did you end up in this career? And is this something you always wanted to do, or did it kind of cultivate from some sort of experiences you had?
Oh boy, the best way to make a psychologist stumble over their words is to ask them about themselves. Because we're not used to talking about ourselves.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So, no, I think I always was passionate about growth and change and helping people find freedom. And I had another career before being a psychologist, which I think actually makes me a better psychologist. But
Ooh, what was
but
that
yeah,
career?
I was a business owner. So, I mean, that
Oh,
goes together with obviously what I do now. And it's funny
yeah.
how you have these phases of life and they all blend together, to
Hmm.
hold them all together, your experiences. And I think it does ultimately make you a better psychologist.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I always wanted to help people. And so I tried it from a business perspective. I would try
Hmm.
it from financial empowerment, different ways. And then I realized like, gosh, you know what? It is so much easier to give people opportunities than it is for them to see them and take them. And
Oh, yeah.
so, yeah, so I thought, oh gosh, like it's so hard because really the main work and the power that we have to take is in our own mind to know the freedom that we have and the opportunities that we have. So I'm like, okay, we're just going to have to go person by person
Yeah.
and work on freeing, women up was what I wanted to do, was to be able to be fully empowered and to own the power that we had and how to
Oh,
recover
yeah.
from trauma. And so that's what that brought me into it. And
Oh
then
my gosh, I love it.
yeah, yeah. And I think too, like a certain amount of age and wisdom, you have to live some
Mhm.
life. You can't just study the human experience. You have to live the human experience. And
Yeah. It's
so,
forever
yeah.
changing, right? Every time you're probably just learning as you go, and then you implement that into your different courses and webinars and all the things you do. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, wisdom is born of life experiences. So we
Yeah.
can be educated and have information, but I think it's like you need to have life experience to have wisdom. So still
Yeah.
growing, still working
Still
on it.
going. Yeah. So can you
Mhm.
share some of your insights into your work with, you've talked about female founders and CEOs that you especially work with regarding empowerment, peak performance, and the unique mental health challenges that they deal with. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started Thrive, a lot of people will start a group practice with it's just like the overflow of a private practice, and they would never have the intention to own a company or
Uh-huh.
to have a bigger impact. But for me, I always wanted to touch as many lives as I could. And as a psychologist, unless I mean, you could do it through speaking, podcasts, what we're doing today, like you
Yeah.
can share and help more people, but really you're limited by the number of hours in your day. So
Mhm.
and I wanted to found a company. And so that made it's interesting how those two dovetail together. Like my experience as a business owner makes me a lot better at actually working with business owners in a
Oh,
practical way and
yeah.
helping challenges of that.
Y-
And then they're drawn to me because they're like, oh, you get it. You get how hard it is
Exactly.
to be a
Right.
CEO and founder. And so I love working with them though. It's yeah, and I would say like the mental health challenges that they face, I would say this, a lot of people become founders because they already have trauma in their past. And
Ooh.
yeah, and so it's it does cause a certain amount of pain and pressure to own your own
Yeah.
company, do your own thing, put your face out there, but the very things that gave them the courage and the ability to handle the risks and the
Hmm.
challenges of being a founder, if they don't deal with those things and use them for their own benefit and grow and heal and evolve, they will end up tearing down the company with the very things that caused them to build it up in the first place. They don't know how to live with success. And
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. Is that something that they kind of mask a little bit by, becoming a CEO or founder, and they kind of cover up their own internal struggles and things, and they start helping others and maybe haven't really dealt with their own at
yeah,
times? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I'm a big believer of, trauma is not, it's not an illness, it's an injury. And
Hmm.
I'm a believer in post-traumatic growth. So, it's like, how do they use the trauma that they have? And they'll have usually like be really good at a couple of things and really
Hmm.
struggle with other things. And so it makes you like these superpowers in certain areas. Like they can, handle enormous amounts of stress. They can think creatively. They can do things in a different way, but then they
Hmm.
may really struggle, usually relationally, actually, they really struggle to trust
Yeah. Yeah.
connection. That's where things start to break down. So it's like helping them to, I call it like keep the superpower, drop the kryptonite. Like,
Yeah.
how do you keep those post-traumatic growth gifts and still be like a powerful person in your world,
Yeah.
and also not live with a lot of the pain and the repercussions of that trauma that's unresolved?
Oh, wow.
So
So when you work with them, do you deal more with the business that they're trying to grow and not having their health, kind of feed over into that? Or do you deal with their personal issues, their personal traumas, or
I mean, but
both?
yeah, I
They kind
mean,
of go
think about
together,
it.
right?
Yeah. I mean, think about if you were to like just kind of mentally think about all the founders that like
Yeah.
how much of like business pain and struggle is caused because the founder has not resolved their issues. I mean, a lot,
A
you know?
lot, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, so they both go together, So it's like if you
Yeah.
heal the person who's like running the company, you do a
Hmm.
lot to make the company a better, safer, healthier place. So
Mm.
it's nice too. I mean, there's then if you make them a healthier person, help them to be the healthiest person, their
Yeah.
influence is really powerful over creating environments and doing good things in the world. And so it has a lot of reach, a lot of ripple effect.
Wow. That's neat. I didn't know that. I didn't know that it went so hand in hand. So that's really cool to hear. So my podcast from Mrs. Temiz, we discussed a lot about going from obviously married to not and kind of what life is like after, going through divorce. It could even be just, heartbreak. It doesn't have to necessarily be marriage to divorce and kind of figuring out how to reinvent themselves. So why did you feel like you would be a good fit for my show and to kind of talk to the audience and stuff? Why did you think
Yeah.
that?
Well, you know what I was thinking about this when you were saying about all the things that are on the website and the things that are my specialty.
Yeah.
I was looking also over the things that you were, that you focus on.
Yeah.
It's it's the Phoenix moments, right? It's the moments when your life, something big happens in your life, whether
Hmm.
it's menopause or divorce is a huge one,
Yeah.
like how do you phoenix out of it? How do you go through that awkward transition phase, evolve, change, use the pain for growth,
Yes.
optimize it to really grow? I mean, all the things that I focus on, very much the same. How,
Absolutely.
yeah, the overcoming, the transitions.
Yeah.
So I love that you do the podcast because you're helping people walk through that of
I'm
like,
trying.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's funny, it's just grown so much from being, when I started out, it was just more like dating after, divorce and what that's like. And it's just grown so much to all these other facets that I found very interesting of how to kind of find yourself again and deal with the pain and the pressure and then be able to move on from that. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. You had so many topics. When I went and looked, I'm like, oh, this is why she'd be good for my show because she has so many different things that you cover, which is really, really cool. And so following significant changes in people's lives, obviously they have a lot of mental health issues. I hate to say a lot, but it really can mess with you, whether you know it or not. You just things trigger you and things just happen, right? So what's the best way, I guess, to just stop yourself from going down that dark path with your everyday habits that can be formed to kind of get you in a better place? Or there's some good habits they can do to not have that happen.
I think that a big part of it, and it's such a different experience for each person going through a divorce, because it's like you're not just losing the relationship, you're losing
Hmm.
your identity, you're losing, or if you're having to connect with your ex who is
Yeah.
like terrible, then you're like, wish you could lose that, but you
Yeah.
can't. Like,
Lose a good 200 pounds
yeah, yeah,
if I
exactly.
need it.
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah. So I mean, I think what I try to when I'm working with women going through that change is like, that again, trying to reframe it as
Yeah.
not just like just endure it, like, look at it instead. I mean, because there's no way to not have it be painful.
Yeah.
It's just painful,
Yeah.
and even if you have to leave, and the majority of divorces are women are the ones that have to put through for the
Oh,
divorce.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know that. So they kind
Yeah.
of initiate it first.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
but I use the example of like it's like that movie, where that guy has his arm trapped under a rock and has to cut off his arm.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that, right? Like it's like I'm trapped under a rock. I may die here. I'm gonna have to, but it is slow. It is painful, and it doesn't mean it
Yeah.
doesn't just because the women are usually the women who have to eventually say, I have to live like this,
Hmm.
or I have
And
to
live
choose
like this.
myself. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I think like what I try to reframe it as or help my clients to see is like, again, how is this your Phoenix moment? Like what,
Hmm.
instead of you're going to, be limping away from this and you're not going to be okay and you're going to be marked and, and you mentioned something about shame that comes with it, like all of that, like how
Hmm.
do you instead, and there's good research to show that women, especially women, can do this really well. Like divorce is
Mm.
such a powerful moment, or breakups. It really gets to the core of us. And we're like,
Hmm.
okay, all right, I got to figure out something. Like I'm not okay with being this way. And there's such a time of reinvention. And so I try to help them to see that the pain is growth pain,
Yeah.
and how to like heal their relationship with themselves, how to allow themselves to grow, how to expand their identity, how
Mhm.
to, you know, yeah. And also it exposes things that were there already. Like the traumas that happen to us in our adult life help us to face and heal the traumas from our childhood, you know?
Oh, I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, because so many people deal with a lot of trauma from their childhood that they don't even address or know about. A lot of times that doesn't come out, right? Until maybe you are going through the divorce and then you're figuring out, why is this particular thing bothering me so much? And you kind of figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that also helps. If you reframe it in that way, it helps to not feel so like, oh, why does this person have so much power over me? Why are they hurt me so much? Like,
Yeah.
why am I letting them hurt me? Because I think a lot of times we'll be like, well, if I just don't feel pain, that makes me strong. And it's like, no, I mean, you care, you love,
Hmm.
have a connection and an attachment that's healthy. So instead of looking at it that way, think of like, okay, how can I heal all those things? Why wasn't I in the relationship in the first place? Did I stay too long? Did I self-betray? Did I
Mm.
outgrow it, but I couldn't admit that I outgrew it, And that's really hard for women to admit a lot of times of like
Oh,
this,
yeah.
this just doesn't work for me, or especially if they get married very young, or there's other things, going on, or they're a high growth person and their partner's not,
Yeah.
so I think it's like that, like using it as just a window of like, okay, let's just go ahead and, you're having this point in your life. Let's look at everything.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with your career? How do you want to do parenting? How are you connecting with your family? What is your identity? And helping them to like really launch into something that's super powerful. And they're like, I mean, nobody's ever happy for the painful stuff and
Hmm.
the trauma of life, but that's how we grow.
Yeah. So I think that's super helpful to know that you got to take the time to grieve it, right? And kind of go through the phase, and that's okay to just lay around and do nothing and eat bonbons on the couch, right? For a while, watch sad movies, whatever it is you need to do to get through that period. But once that's over, you got to take it day by day, step by step, and see what you can do, right? It's incredible when you start to figure out and I went through, a good divorce. I did kind of outgrow him. I did get married young. So that was a very similar thing, and just kind of fell out of love, and we were just at different places. But I think the biggest discovery for me is finding my own way now. And it's so like rewarding when you do.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
such a great
absolutely.
feeling. Yeah.
And look, I mean, and that's like, look what you're doing now of helping other people do that, right? If
Yeah.
you hadn't gone through that, like it helps you to have the wisdom of the experience to then point the way for other people to do it. I mean, again,
Huge.
nobody wants to go through the hard time, but it's a powerful thing. That's yeah.
I like that a lot. So another big topic you specialize in is the mental health impact of perimenopause and menopause. I
Uh,
don't know where I'm at in that whole phase or anything. So, just can you elaborate on that a little bit? Give us some suggestions on how to get through that a little bit easier and how to maybe even kind of really know where you are at in that phase. I think that's a little bit tricky.
yeah, there's so little information on it that it's painful.
Okay,
I mean,
right. I found that because
yeah.
I'm like, I can't find much at all. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what period, no pun intended there, I'm at, but I don't get my period. So for me to figure out where I'm at in that phase, I'm sure a lot of women go through that and you just
Yeah.
start going, oh, it's menopause, right? You just blame it on everything. It's
Yeah.
menopause, but I
Yeah.
don't know how you know.
Yeah, I think everyone is in that place, right? Because it's just not, there's no, for a myriad of reasons. I think there's also has been, people just haven't had, I think, a vehicle to share their own experiences, like women to
Mhm.
talk about it. And unless you have like a mom or an aunt who's like really open, and then again, things were very different when they went through it than when we're going through it. So
Yeah.
it's tough now. Thank God, like people are sharing, you know what I mean? People are talking
Hmm.
about it. And there's a whole group of women that are like doing it in a new way, which is awesome. They're talking about perimenopause. They're talking about menopause, like celebrities and doctors and, you
Yeah.
know, going through it. And I'm 46. So I am like, you know, in the midst of
You're right
perimenopause.
there with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what got me interested in it really was, you know, my own self going through it
Hmm.
and so many of my clients, because, you know, you tend to, as a psychologist, I think of it as like, it's a little like when you put out a dating profile, it's like you have like a band of ages kind of around yours and it moves up or down. So
Yes.
all
Yes.
I'm somewhat in my age group. And when I started learning more about it, I'm like, oh my God, like now most women, I'm like, go get your hormones tested. Go
Yeah.
talk to someone. These are books to read. These are things to do. Like, because the mental health symptoms are some of the earliest ones that happen, and they
Hmm.
start around 40. So, you know,
Ooh.
it's yeah. So it's like you're having this roller coaster of hormones, and perimenopause is tougher really than, I mean, menopause is its own thing, but you know, menopause is technically when you've had a year with no period. Like
Okay.
that's when we count the date of menopause. So until you hit 12 months of no period, you're not technically in menopause. Perimenopause is like sometimes a good decade. So,
Wow. I didn't
and
realize that.
yeah, and so it's like you can have anxiety, you can have depression, sleep problems are really
Hmm.
like accounted for. Just you know, testosterone, something a lot of times women don't look at or think about because like, oh, that's a man hormone, that's not a
Hmm.
me thing, but really that tends to go down, really impacts our sleep, impacts, you know, our sex drive, impacts like a lot of things. And so I just say to anyone that's over 40, I'm like, go get tested, go see what, you know, what's going, get educated.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of avoidance around it because I mean, when I think about like what kind of does like past menopause, I kind of like look and there's like a foggy kind of whatever, and then maybe Golden Girls, right? Like that's what we've been, you know,
Yes.
and so that's not like that's you know we. But then in the if we look at it as like I get to curate the second half of my life,
Hmm.
and I get to write my story, and again, it's like another one of those Phoenix moments, and it's like it's a really powerful time in women's lives if we own it and refuse to be made invisible or refuse to be made whatever pigeonholed into anything, you
Yeah.
know, and we have to just be do it our way and then share, you know, amongst friends and share with each other and yeah, it's such a powerful time and
Hmm.
it's there's just it's just so invisible, so
It
bizarre.
is. I feel the same way. I feel like I just don't hear much about it, until somebody has a hot flash and we just automatically go, oh, I'm in menopause, and it just kind of comes like that. But I couldn't even tell you when mine actually started that I was going, through the perimenopause. I just know that I get hot flashes and I don't
Yeah,
sleep well. All of
yeah.
these things that you say.
Well,
Yeah.
and too, so there, you know, women used to be given hormones for it, and that was, you know, that was more the norm, kind of 80s and 90s, and that was, you know, not the best hormones, still not the ones they're giving today.
Yeah.
But there was a study that came out. I don't know if you remember that scared everybody that linked breast cancer and hormone replacement.
Hmm.
And so what happened is a bunch of women just got off of hormones and then they never kind of looked at it again. And so, but now there's been a lot more research into it, a lot more digging into that study saying that like that's actually not the case. You know, it's not a one for one link. And for most women, it's really a positive thing. And there's different hormones out there and there's different ways to do it. And there's doctors that
Hmm.
specialize in it. But, you know, a lot of OBGYNs don't have the training in it,
Yeah.
which they will say, like the ones that do specialize in menopause, you need someone who specializes in it to like help you walk you through the journey.
Yeah.
And you know, and look at your unique way of going through it. But like, and too, a lot of women are having kids older. And so it's like you can be raising young children and going through many perimenopause. You know,
Oh,
I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm like, oh my God, these things are really lumped up on
oh
each
my
other.
gosh.
So
Yeah.
it's, you know, but yeah, I think we have to like think about what are same with divorce. What is the image I have in my mind
Hmm.
of who I am if I go through this? And then really take that apart and be like, where did I get that? Like, you know, I'm not with divorce, I'm not the sad divorcee. I'm not,
Yeah.
you know, like with menopause, I'm not the old woman with the fuzzy hair. Like we have to just defy it, but we have to question it. And then we have to create a different, because I mean, otherwise there's nothing positive from it, you know, around
Yeah.
menopause. It's just
I'm like,
enduring
is there anything
it.
positive really about it? I mean, I guess it's just if you're embracing it, and some people love getting older and they love going into this phase of their lives because they do feel like they really know themselves and they're at a place where they're like, I know what I want in life, what I want to be, what I want to do, all of these things. And I think that's really important. I don't know that I'm like, yay, menopause.
Yeah.
So, but but there is, like you said, there's a lot of different like hormone replacement things that you can take. I've heard about I think it's the little stones or the pebbles or something. Do you know what I'm talking
Oh, the
about?
pellets.
Pellets,
Yeah.
pellets, yes. How
Yeah.
does
Mhm.
do you know much about that or how that works?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's different ways to do the hormone replacement. I don't want to step too much out of since that's not my area, but
Yeah.
you can do it with pellets, you can do injections, you can do creams. There's different ways to do it.
Yeah. I have like a
And
yam cream, like
yeah,
a,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's probably progesterone. Yeah, yeah. So it's like looking at the different ones. Usually testosterone is the first one that needs to be looked at, and then usually progesterone and then estrogen. And so it's going to a good doctor who can
Yeah.
measure it. And even without the measuring, like the symptoms, you can tell a lot from the symptoms. And
Hmm.
so, they could be like, oh, this is what's going on. And then just make it not so painful. And I think a really cool thing, and you can kind of see this happen where, I mean, and it's half of our life at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, it really is like when we hit menopause, women live a long time. And so are we just
Yes.
like thinking of ourselves as, we have to evolve and like, okay, so how do I become powerful in a different way? How
Hmm.
do I like own this? How do I, and then you really do run out of fucks to give. I mean, I always think
Hmm.
like maybe they're attached to eggs. I don't know. Or
Yeah.
ovaries. Like, I'm out of eggs. I'm out of fucks. Like I just,
I
I'm
love
just
that.
being
That's a
truthful, right?
bumper sticker.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's partially because at a certain point you're like, this is my life. Like I'm gonna make it what it is. A
Mhm.
lot of women actually go through divorces in that age more than ever before because of the financial freedom, because they can,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
and and they've like, I've raised my kids. Do I want to live with this person alone for the rest of my life?
Hmm. And I think
And
that's such a valid question for yourself because, and why not at that point? I mean, I'm not advocating divorce or anything, but at that point, that's where you should do something. If you feel like
yeah,
you're stuck in this place, like that's the way I just always try to think about it. We have one life. We live once. We should be happy. And if you
yeah,
find that you're not, then figure out a way to be happy, whatever that may be. So
yeah,
I'd love that.
absolutely. Yeah, or and again, I think sometimes it can be the wake up call of I'm going to fight for my happiness. And if,
Mhm.
and usually women fight for their happiness within marriage a long time. Whenever some, when a man is like, I'm surprised, I'm like, are you though? Because I feel like women like try to fight the fight and then
Really?
they're done and it's done. But I do think it's like fight for the marriage that you want.
Yeah.
And if it's not with the person that you're with and they have a really different vision for it, uh, then then it's not,
Might
allow
not be
them
for
the
you.
freedom to find something else. Yeah.
Yeah. It
You
doesn't
know,
always need to be this terrible thing, right? It can just be like two people that just don't match up anymore for whatever reason. And it doesn't mean, I just had a woman that I interviewed yesterday that wrote a book about having a good divorce. And,
yeah.
that's so important. I mean, I had a very good divorce. I'm still great friends with him, but people really poo-poo on that and they think it's so weird. And I'm just like, I don't understand that. We went about it the very best way possible. We still care about each other. We were married for 20 years. Why would I now all of a sudden not care about you? So I know it doesn't work for everybody, but there's so many positive things that you can figure out about the situation. It doesn't always have to be this
No,
negative thing, right?
no. Well, and do you mind if I ask, well, how old were you when you got married?
Oh, I was 24, barely. Just
Yeah.
turned 24. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, the divorce rates for people that get married before 25 are way higher than someone that
Yeah.
gets 25.
But
You're
you're
blooming.
just two different people. You don't even know what you want at 20, in your 20s. Well, that's why I love when people wait. I think 30s is a great age to like kind of get married and start to settle down and just enjoy your 20s. But yeah, I just kind of figured that I was like, gosh, this just doesn't, I don't have like the feelings for him like I should for somebody that I'm, so in love with. And it just was more of like a friendship, for me with him. And I thought, is that how I want this to go for the second half here? Do I just want to hang out with my friend or do I want to find that passion and that joy and
Yeah.
love? And I wasn't even I wasn't even wanting sex anymore because it was just because he was my friend, right? Like, who wants to have sex with your best friend? So
Yeah.
it's, it's all of that stuff. And I was just craving the passion and I'm still craving that. I haven't found my person yet that I can find what I'm really looking for, but the journey has been fun, I'll
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Well, and then, when you get married so young too, you don't really, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those biological things that makes no sense anymore, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, we hit puberty and evolve and feel ready to mate and couple up like a good, I don't know, 10 years before our brains start developing.
Right.
Like our literally, like if you give someone a personality test every year before 25, it
Yeah.
will significantly after 25,
Oh,
26. Yeah, it stays very similar for the rest of
wow.
their life. Yeah, unless they make significant changes. So who do you know to marry?
Yes.
And yeah, it can be like friendship or it can be excitement. And then you're really dating someone's potential at that point
Yeah.
too, and your lives may be in a similar place, but you really, as you age, you learn about where, and that's the nice thing about dating. And when you get
Hmm.
older, is you can check someone's scoreboard. Like you can look at their life trajectory and it's so much better than like
So much
someone,
better.
yeah, you could look at it and you're like, oh, okay, like you worked on yourself, you've gone to therapy, like, which
Yeah.
is such a big thing with men are still resistant to that. They're getting better, but like you worked on your stuff, you've healed, you're mature, you're, all the things that I want.
Hmm.
You can look at that in the middle of life and see. And
Yeah.
also what their former marriage was. I always get a little bit nervous about men that are middle aged that have never been married. Not the same for women. Like I
Yeah.
think it's women who are middle aged and have never been married. That doesn't mean much. But for a man, or not in a negative way, but for a man, a lot of times I'm like, is there something attachment wise that's going on that this person?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And that's
finding,
such an important topic, with dating and stuff for, people that are dating right now is when we meet somebody that hasn't been married, doesn't have kids, a man has not been married, doesn't have kids, that can sometimes be a red flag to us. Like, oh, and I see it because they don't truly understand, to not have kids, what it's like to put somebody else first. And that's just what I've recognized from the dating, right? When it's somebody that's single, never been married, no kids, they don't fully understand that. Now my kids are older, so it doesn't really affect me as much. But for people with younger kids, those kids are going to be so important to them until you're in that committed relationship. So I think that's really tough. But also, if you look at it the other way, if they've been married more than once, that you're like, is that a red flag too? What didn't he learn the first time? And now he's been divorced the second time, I don't know how
yeah.
you gauge all that really.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way that like you talk about your divorce, your marriage,
Mhm.
that's such a healthy way. You've obviously looked at it. You obviously look at your part in it. You've done your work around it.
Yeah.
So I think look for that. If someone,
Yes.
and especially I think, if someone, oh, these, crazy exes and oh, she's just so awful. It's like, I mean, maybe, but did you work on why you ended up with her in the first place? I'm like, probably not. Like, what was your part in it? And unless someone's like, hit the wall of themselves and did all the work that I was, saying before, like it's an opportunity to do that. If they
Yeah.
didn't, they are doomed to repeat because
Yeah.
they figured out like, how did I end up in that? Is that something that I'm pushing someone towards, or is that something
Mhm.
I'm trying out, or is that something I need? Do I need chaos so that I can feel like the good one? I mean, quote unquote, nice men. Oh
Yeah.
boy. Like that's they're challenging, because if they're not looking at their part in it, it means that when they go through a divorce, the person that they're with has to either be evil and bad to justify them having the divorce,
Hmm.
or they have something has to be wrong with them. And instead of like, what, this isn't a good fit. Like we're not bad people. It
Yeah.
just wasn't meant to be. And that does make me nervous when people have to like burn down their ex to justify their decisions. That
Yes. I
it
agree
shows
with
that,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because a
Mhm.
lot of times they're not looking at themselves, and you're right, and what part they did play in that. So I think
Yeah.
that really working on yourself after you come out of something, I mean, things that they can do, a lot. I immediately started, there's so many books and there's relationship coaches and there's,
Mhm.
I mean, there's so much stuff on Instagram. It's just a constant, and it can make you crazy brain, right? Because one man, I'm like, wait, no, I thought I'm supposed to lean in here and lean out here, and I don't know, you're all over the place. But if you find those specific things and you look at your attachment style, for
Yeah.
one thing, I think abandonment is a huge thing that can later play a part in, something like that, or somebody that, even has an affair, whatever. Often that goes back, if I'm not wrong here, to abandonment, right? And they're the fear of being left by themselves. So they have to have something there at all times. But also knowing your love languages, I think, is a
Yeah.
huge thing. That's very important.
Yeah. I mean, I think understanding too, not to, I could just go on and on. I love this topic because it's so like it's so educational for
Yeah.
ourselves. Okay. Well, and I'll say this about cheating. Something I've noticed is women tend to cheat to leave.
Okay.
Men to cheat to usually keep a barrier and stay in the relationship. Now that's a
Ooh.
big generalization. Yeah. But a lot of times when a woman is trapped in a long-term marriage with a nice enough guy,
Mhm.
she will be like, well, I don't have a reason. He's good enough. He's nice enough. And then they will cheat because they are starving to death for
Mm.
like actual passion, sexual connection,
Yeah.
attachment, but then leaves usually with that. And so there's a lot of women, but they don't share that a lot. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of shame around women cheating, and men a lot of times, or anyone in relationships, you can use it as a barrier to your
Mhm.
relationship. You can maintain an avoidant way of interacting because you have another person.
Yeah.
You know, you can do that with work, you can do that with addictions, you can do that with different things, but there's something between you and your partner. There's
Mhm.
something else in the relationship that keeps it from getting too vulnerable, too intimate, and you have like an
Mhm.
escape clause.
Oh,
So
yeah,
yeah.
that's very interesting. Yeah, there's so much. I haven't really delved into that topic of just, cheating and what that looks like and why people do that. So that's very interesting. Do you think more women cheat than men just based off of what you said? Do you know the statistics around that?
Oh, it's so interesting. I've been thinking about this recently of like, I think it varies in how you define cheating too. So I do think, and this is why I say that, like there's some cultures that have a reputation for like, oh, the men always cheat. They always do
Mhm.
this. Well, partially, I think there's a lot of men that are dipping out on their wives and doing things like online relationships,
Mhm.
and I'm not a believer that like porn is like a cheating. It's not. But if you're using it to replace sex with your partner, if
Then
you're
it
using,
is.
yeah, or an
Yeah.
online relationship or sexual relationship, I think some men don't have the courage or the social skills to maybe actually cheat, or they're not in that life phase, or they don't have the time. But if they're not having sex with their partner and they're doing something else to satisfy themselves sexually and emotionally, then I
Mhm.
would say, I don't know, if I'm going to count that in, then maybe. Women, I think, do tend to look for emotional connection with a human being. And
Mhm.
so I don't know the numbers because I think women, there's so much shame around it. They're less likely to report it,
Yeah.
or talk about it. And, because they're like, oh, he's such a nice guy. Why did I do this? I'm like, because you're starving to death.
Yeah.
And you stole bread because you're starving to death. Or like, I'm like, let's look at why you're so hungry and what's going on.
Yeah.
And but there's a lot of shame around, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad person.
Mm.
Women do tend to self-blame. I mean, it's humans tend to either blame ourselves for everything or the other person, when it's really both.
Oh, those poor nice guys that finished last.
Well,
Oh.
yeah, but at the same time though, I think, what you were saying before of women have I mean, like, we want a nice, safe man,
Mhm.
but I think ultimately part of us wants a powerful man. We
Mhm.
want like our equal. We want that, it's the, like, I have a golden retriever,
Mhm.
because I have children. Do I feel safe with my golden retriever in an alley? No. Like, I mean, he's not like, it's not that he's good. He's just so safe and so docile, which is perfect because my 5-year-old can sit on his head and he's like, it's love. But
Yeah.
yeah, and so I think sometimes as women, it's really hard because, especially when we have bad experiences with male power and strength, we have such a mixed up relationship. And I think
Mhm.
that's where we get into, or where men get confused around nice guy versus bad boy. Really, we're looking for power under control. I think we're looking for a man who is like our equal and who is like a powerful, evolving man who like challenges us in the right ways, but who has good intentions, like more like a, I don't know, like a loyal Rottweiler.
Yeah.
We're not looking for a golden retriever, but if we're optimizing for safety, sometimes we'll end up with a golden retriever
Yeah.
and then we wondered why we're bored. And so
Mm. I think you're so right on that because I think, yeah, And I hate that, saying that nice guys finish last, because we all do want a nice guy, somebody who treats us well. That's, that's where the confusion comes in, because we're looking for the man that does treat us well, that cares about our well-being, all of these good things. But then you want that bad boy there
Yeah.
too. And you want, sometimes you just want, you want to poke the bear a little bit to kind of get them to come out and show you a little bit of how they can protect you and be your savior, right? And so when they're always so nice, I hate that for them. Because I do that too. And I always pass over the nice guy and I end up with the jerk who, like, doesn't give a shit about me.
Yeah, and I think it's like this is I try to like help by looking at it as like nice is not the same as kind. And so, we want, I think, like if we look at it that way, conflict avoidant,
Mhm.
unable to like stand up to, to say like, no, I want this, or to have like and then that's different from just being a jerk, it's like someone who can say and kind of call you out on your stuff. And
Yeah.
that's like, so, but for your own good, not
Yeah.
because they're not going to use their power to hurt you. They're going to use it to like challenge you, and then we in turn do the same, and that's how you end up in those like really powerful like power couple dynamics,
Yeah.
it's like you do challenge each other, and you can like call each other out knowing that you guys really want the best for each other. No one's
Yeah.
trying to abuse the other, no one's trying to hurt the other. So it's like having the power and
Mhm.
doing your best to use it to help others. And we have a lot of power over men, tons,
Mhm.
and they are, they're desperately want our approval. They just don't know a lot of times how to get it, or
Yeah.
how to be, like a grown-up man that
Yeah.
has that relationship. So I would say like the nice guy, if there's the inability to have conflict, there's no safety in that. Even,
Yes.
like you want someone who can call you out on your stuff,
Yeah.
but
And respectfully, like not in front of other people, but like, yeah, you have each other's back. That is such a huge thing. And you don't even realize that when you're just out, and even if somebody's being attacked verbally in a way, and you may not agree with that, they still have your back. And then when you go home, you can go, hey, I didn't really agree with that, but you're my
yeah.
person and I'm there for you. That's
Yeah, yeah,
good.
it's like being together, like, and knowing, and then also listening to each other.
Yeah.
It's like, what's your intention? Is your intention to trap someone and hurt them, or is your
Mhm.
intention to like really motivate someone to be their best? And I think sometimes,
Yeah.
like, on both sides, like, what that's not something we always do. But I think
Yeah.
women are really like excited by it, but scared by it. And so it's also healing our own relationship and our own attachment things, you
Yeah.
know, of knowing. And I think the more we come into our power, the more we can handle the power of the person that we're with,
Mhm.
and be able to, push back when we need to, and have hard discussions, and hard conversations don't become, blowout fights where it's like two people's inner children duking it out,
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh. So we were talking a little bit about, shame and people feeling a little bit shameful when they do get divorced. Is there certain things or certain advice you would give to someone to kind of overcome that and just make sure
Mm.
they know that's not what this is about. It's often about just finding yourself, right? Not necessarily shame. How would you answer something like that if they felt that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to look at like where the shame come from and where you believe that and why, I mean, because we all have a lot of beliefs around relationships, marriage, and divorce. And so, you know, gosh, and it's so culturally different, religion, culture, different like beliefs around, oh, this is a failure, you're not going to be okay, you're somehow, whatever it might be, they have to
Mhm.
look at what's their brand of shame, where does
Yeah.
it come from, and what are their beliefs about marriage. And really it's
Yeah.
like, what did your parents teach you? Because sometimes, like for example, if someone, had divorced parents,
Mhm.
and they wanted more than anything to have, like a family, the stable family in their mind of what that looked like. I don't want to be that person. And then they have shame around it. They really have to unpack how they feel about their parents' divorce. And they have to
Mm.
like, look at like, okay, this is different than my parents. And let me look into that, or why,
Yeah.
And
And often it's probably just about the time. Life is
yeah,
just so different than it was then, right? I mean, it's so different. People never got divorced before. That was shameful years
yeah.
ago, right? It's much more common now. So it's even hard, I guess, to kind of compare those. I
Yeah,
agree.
And ultimately too, the finances come down to it. Like women haven't had the ability to leave for a long time
Mhm.
financially, right? Like that was just the end of them. If you couldn't have a credit card or own a home 2 generations back, like it's a big deal. And even it
Yeah.
still varies state to state of what you're able to do. And so there's a lot of women who stayed because it was like, well, do I feed my children? Or do I,
Yeah.
and it was really like, it was a survival thing. And so where
Mm.
they're like, oh, people are so much more willing to get divorced. It's like, well, but maybe we should look at how do we build good marriages, not just an endurance race till the end of life. Like,
Mm.
yay, I won. I died miserable. And marriage is so much is
That's,
terrible. We're both miserable. We're
that
together.
sounds so
Like,
sad.
yeah, like we need to redefine that. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it forces us then, I think, instead of, if we look at ourselves in that, can I have the marriage that I want with the person that I'm with?
Mhm.
And doing the full work in that. I mean, I think we need to enter marriage with the intention to grow in it and to grow together and to use it as that and to do it together, because I think it's on both sides, right? Like it's staying in an unhappy marriage without working on it is terrible,
Yeah.
and really that's some of the highest levels of unhappiness is people who are unhappily married are way less happy than divorced women. Like divorced women are way happier than
Yeah.
women who marriages.
Oh, I
Um,
love hearing that.
yeah.
Because, I think that's the scary thing for everybody is they think that they're just going to never find anybody again. They're going to be all alone. It's better just to stay and just put up with whatever shit I'm dealing with, but it's not always the case. So we don't often talk on my show about postpartum depression.
Mm.
My show's more geared towards middle-aged women kind of reinventing themselves, like we've talked about. So we do have a large demographic of younger women that listen in as well, though. So I do want to kind of touch on this a little bit. If you can discuss and kind of address postpartum depression, how you address it in your practice, and what strategies you find most effective for supporting mothers that are kind of going through some challenging times, I think would be nice.
I mean, I think really postpartum depression, just perimental or, perinatal mental health is kind of where menopause
Ooh,
is
what was
broken.
that word you said?
Oh, perinatal mental health. So everything around, having a baby. So
Okay.
maternal mental health, there are different terms for it, but maternal mental health, right?
Okay.
So the changes of your mental health around having babies, like was about as kind of a black and white, short, didn't understand it kind of a thing as menopause is now. But
Mm.
we've done a little bit more work on it. And so there we know a little bit more, but it's still really misunderstood. So that's just a setup to say a lot of things fall under the umbrella where we say postpartum depression. And this is something I actually used to use as an example of why I sort of thrive is because we cannot just look at women's mental health as like, here's your diagnosis. Here's we have to look at someone as what's going on in everything in their life. So if someone comes in, they just had a baby and they have been diagnosed with postpartum depression by the OBGYN,
Mhm.
I'm going to look at a whole range of things. One, do you have depression before? Right? Because if you already had depression, there's different things that could be impacted by having, a baby. Maybe thought you had to get off your medications, or maybe it's the extra pressure, or maybe it's just bringing up things that were already there. Do you have childhood trauma? Because then stuff comes up. I mean, children should come with giant trigger warnings on their foreheads because, it's like it brings up all the things, especially when we have struggles with our moms.
Yeah.
Nothing brings up the things like being a mom, and then you're like, oh, you just revisit all those things in your life.
Mhm.
I say it's true for men too, but it's like you're looking at your childhood through a different lens, so it brings up a lot. How's your relationship? Like
Mm.
there's a lot of stuff that when you're both kind of living like independent, like professional lives, and the woman's taking on a lot of burdens that she didn't need to take on, and that doesn't shift around. If you add a baby on top of her, she just starts to drown.
Oof, yeah.
So like, is she happy to be with that person? Is your relationship in a good place? Because the majority of relationships, their happiness takes a big dive with babies.
Mhm.
And then, if you're in a good place and you're a good partnership, you can like go up and, end up being happier down the road. But, sleep deprivation, like there's nothing sexy about the experience. Like it,
Yeah.
you're not feeling awesome. So it really is a big challenging time.
Yeah.
Trauma, like a lot of women, their birth experiences are hugely traumatic and they're just like overlooked, like, oh, well, I almost died, I almost bled out,
Oh my
or like,
God.
yeah. And then someone's, I just had a major medical event, do you have to go back to work right away? Like, what's the support around that? Is it, how
Oh.
is that impacting you? So I love working with women while they're pregnant to prepare them. Or like what I really love is before they even get pregnant. So starting with a woman and looking at all those factors. And a lot of times they'll come in when their mothers have had postpartum depression and they're scared. And they're like, I don't want to go down that path. I know it's in my family line. Help me.
Yeah.
Let's
Oh,
patch.
good for recognizing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you get them at that point, you can work on the things, get their environment set up. They need sleep, they need support, they, maybe need to have hard conversations with their partner. They need to figure out their finance stuff. They need to figure out what like beliefs do they have around what they have to do and the shame about if I can't do it. That's all those beliefs. Because usually if a woman has a baby, you rarely see them walk in a therapy door unless it gets real bad until the kids are about 2,
Oh,
because they're so
wow.
busy. That's not the time to find a therapist. So it's
Yeah.
like, so
No
you'll
time
see,
to sleep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, or I will see another one is that I'll see people that like had a really bad bout of postpartum depression. They're getting ready to have another child. And like, I can't do this again. Like, help me. I want to have a baby, but I'm so scared. I don't want to go to the dark place. And so doing work in between, but it's tough once you're in the storm. It's like, hey, let's patch this boat while I'm in stormy waters. It's like they have a hard time, showing up, being able to do it. So
Yeah.
again, it's so complicated.
Gosh. It
Yeah.
is. And yeah, I guess it's just every person is just so different. And that's why you just have to take the time as a therapist to kind of learn all of the different facets about what's going on before you can actually
Yeah.
diagnose it. So me asking for like a general,
Yeah.
what do
No,
you do with depression?
all I have to say is it's like, because an OBGYN will be like postpartum depression,
Yeah.
and they mean well, and they'll just do their little assessment and then send you to therapy or give you medication. And which it might be, right? It might be hormonally, related depression that is causing you to feel certain, but it could be a lot of those other things. And if you
Yeah.
still, fix those other things, and make those better and get the support, I guess it's not about pathologizing, because it's
Yeah.
that shame, of I'm bad. Oh, I can't be a mom. I can't handle it. What's wrong?
Hmm.
And then women hide and they don't actually come and seek support, or they underestimate or underreport what they're going through until later. It's really
Yeah.
so sad. And they're alone in it, and their partners
Yeah.
don't know what to do. And it's, or they're doing it alone and they're really having to figure that out from being alone. But yeah,
Wow. Us
yeah,
women, we sure did get the short end of the stick, didn't we? I say, oh my gosh, all this stuff that we go through, having
yeah.
childbirth and menopause and all of that stuff, but we're dealing
Well,
with
and
it.
it's looking at those moments in a woman's life, like the ways that we're talking about things. It's like, okay, menopause, perimenopause, right? Hormones are really involved in that. How do we be aware
Mhm.
and, and not pathologize it and get have our best experience from it? Same with having babies. Our hormones are going to have a lot of stuff going on during that time. Same with like puberty. A lot of women don't have depression and anxiety start until puberty. And
Mhm.
so, little boys that have mental health struggles, it tends to start younger. But
Oh,
girls, it tends to get really rough around that age for like a myriad of reasons, but the hormones don't help if other things are going on.
yeah.
And all the pressure and all the things. So it's like, if we can help women to really navigate and feel like powerful and supported and educated in these life transitions, these phoenix moments where you're passing from, childhood into womanhood and adding motherhood into that. And then
Yeah.
adding on top of that, like being, we didn't have a good word for it. I don't know, matriarch energy,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
out of that of like powerful kind of, and we just don't have a lot of examples for that.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Wow. So I'm kind of going all over the place here because you do cover so many different topics. So I'm just kind of throwing them out there of things that I've been wanting to talk about. And so one, we were talking a little bit about trauma before.
Mhm.
Do you deal much in trauma bonds? I really haven't ever addressed that. Like,
Yeah.
kind of, can you talk a little bit about how those kind of form and what you can do to kind of get yourself out of that, or what's expected when you're in it if you deal with that?
Yes, it's one of those. I have to explain kind of what it means, because the words will get popular in on Instagram and trauma bond. It's not like actually a clinical word, but I will tell you what we believe it is underlying it, right? Which is
Okay.
an attachment trauma that is being activated with the person that we're with. And so and I have to go back to kind of explain attachment. Like, so when you're a child, when you're born, right? Like your parent is the person you go to for comfort,
Mhm.
so you've probably seen that with your kids. It's like they go to you, like you're their person. Everything in them biologically is like, I must go to my parent, usually the mom, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
either parent, whoever is their caregiver. But if the parent is the one that hurts them, then that's how you end up with what we call a disorganized attachment. So if the parent hits the child feels pain. They biologically crave the comforting of the parent, but the parent's the one that hit them. And so they end up in this dynamic, this push-pull between their own biology of like, I feel pain, I have to go to this person who will heal me. And that's that disorganized attachment. And when I was in training, I did like a little work with CPS. It was heartbreaking because the child that was so badly abused, physically scarred by their parent, would just be devastated being separated from their parent. And so, yeah. And so it's like our desire to bond, especially like with our person. And so that happens as a child, it happens with our mate, you know, or it happens with our partner. And so there's nothing that's really that kind of gets to that level of depth of attachment as that parent-child relationship as our partner. And that's why all those super fun attachment things come up, because we'll be fine amongst our friends and our work and everything, and then feel like we're going to crazy town with like our partner, where we're like, why am I so anxious about this? And why am I feeling? Because it's that, like, it's bringing up, because attachment is, as a child, to be separated from your parent is death. Like, you won't survive a second. So it's like you're one, especially we're mammals. I mean, we are mammals. We are pack animals. We don't have claws. We don't have fangs. We don't have scales. All we've got is each other, which is why attachment is so important. So when we have a partner that causes us pain, especially if it's similar to something we experienced as a child, you know, and it can bring up those things, even if, or we felt intense connection with this person and then they hurt us. Yeah. And then we go back to them. And then that creates that same dynamic of like, they're both the poison and the cure. Like, they're hurting you, it's tearing you down, you're feeling bad, you feel drawn to them to feel better, you know, and then,
what a vicious cycle.
It does. Yeah. And so usually what I will say to women is like, first of all, don't shame yourself, because shame is a cold, dark, lonely place that's just going to drive you back to them. So let's talk about, like, first of all, healing your trust in yourself, because usually when that happens, it's like, again, it's like that identity. We think like, oh, I'm not the kind of woman who does that. I'm not the kind of woman who lets men treat me like that. I'm not the kind of woman who would put up with that. Everybody's the kind of woman who could do that. So let's just like throw that out, because that's not fair to, you know, people who go through that. And, or to ourselves. And so it's like, instead looking at like, what's pulling me in? What do I need? Like, do I need love from other places? Is this person like triggering something, like I'm desperately seeking connection with them? How do I get that somewhere else? So I'm not so starving, so I can break that bond enough that I'm not, because it becomes like a drug. Yeah. You know, and it can be a drug-like effect. It really is. Relationships are that powerful that we do have a drug-like, you know, we can have withdrawal, we can have, you know, it can become deeply addictive.
Yeah. Gosh, I've seen it. And, you know, a lot of times I'm assuming it happens when you have certain things that trigger, like if you have some sort of medical issue that, you know, you've separated, you're no longer together, and then something happens and then it brings you right back, right? Because you're looking for that care person again. And even though, like you said, they're the person that tore you down and made your life a living hell, but now they can give you the comfort you need in this time of trauma, right? So then you're going back to it again, and it just keeps going over and over until how do you break that trauma bond? You just, you're like, get out.
You work on you. And this is what I will, whenever someone asks me like, okay, you know, is this relationship doomed? Is it me? Is it them? Is it the relationship? I'm like, look, it's the same. You don't know. All you can do, work on you. The healthier you get, your relationship will either get healthier. And then you know that it was like your partner, we always have a partner dynamic, right? Something is in that, or the relationship will absolutely get awful, because you were attached over your wounds, not your best healed self. And so it's like, you don't know now, because it's hard to have clarity when, like, you know, we have the glasses with mud on them. Let's work on wiping the mud off your glasses. Let's make sure that you're making, you know, good choices about getting love in other ways and feeling good about yourself. I mean, are you ending up with the person who, you know, usually it's like they make you feel really good at first and then start to tear you down. And that feeling of just, you know, unabashed love from someone that like reminds us usually of someone from, you know, childhood or something we needed and didn't get. we will seek it the same way a child does. And it's, but there's so much shame.
Wow.
It's like, why am I doing this? I'm better than this. I'm a smart, capable person. Like, why am I letting this happen? Then you start to believe you're that person, you feel shame, and then you're more likely to go to them.
Oh my
You know?
gosh. It's amazing how everything's so intertwined.
Yeah.
Like just everything really leads back to childhood issues that you may have had. And if you don't ever deal with those, how do you really move forward and address it? I think it's I think it's awesome that we have so much out there right now that we can go to learn about, all the different attachment styles or why you're this way or why you do that. I think that's really huge. And therapy as well used to be kind of a shameful thing. And now I think it's just become something that's like, oh yeah, we go to therapy. People are going to therapy, earlier in their relationships before they get in too deep to kind of find out if they're really compatible. I think it's a smart thing. So
Yeah.
really good.
Oh, agreed. And I do think, I mean, that's like when I founded Thrive, like that's the whole don't just survive, thrive. It was
Yeah.
because of we have how do we thrive? How do we just not like limp along and be functional, right? How do we thrive?
Mhm.
And more people are, they don't even have a diagnosis. Like, a lot of times it's just they're like, I'm not happy, or I'm, so high functioning that maybe I don't meet diagnostic criteria for XYZ, but I'm miserable and I want better and I know I could do better. And so it's like helping people do that. Now couples therapy is starting to become that, which I love. During
Yes.
COVID, yeah, it was like during COVID, there was a wave of divorces. Any of my clients that got a divorce, I was like, that's okay. Like, I
Good.
was like, that needed to be happening. And now you're stuck in the space with this person and you're like, okay, I gotta end
Okay.
this.
Yeah.
I mean, like
It's a
it just,
full-on therapy session, COVID.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then the people who stayed were like, oh, why are we settling? And now they go to
Yes.
now couples therapy isn't just like a last ditch effort before divorce. It's people are getting into it at the beginning of their relationships,
So
especially
smart.
again, who've been through divorce or who know. I mean, you're not so we're so casual about
Mhm.
relationships and parenting when we think about like we do so much schooling to do what we do professionally and what we're going to wing it in our relationship like that makes
Yeah.
no sense. Yeah, like maybe I should learn communication skills, maybe we should like have tools, like, but there used to be shame around it, now there's not, which is there's much less. And
Yeah.
so
Do
yeah.
you think there's a time that's a little too early to do it where you might look at the relationship and go, all right, you guys have been dating for like a month or two and you're already going to couples therapy. Is that a little bit of a, I guess, red flag where you're like, all right, guys, it's a little too early for that. But
Yeah.
is there a certain window that's not weird? I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, it varies. I do think if you're in the first month or so, you don't even have the information. I mean, you're still,
Yes.
I get it. It's usually people who've been through a really bad breakup and they're cautious, right?
Yep.
It's
And you're
you
carrying your baggage into the next one, right? And trying to figure
Yeah,
that
or
out.
you're afraid. Oh no, is this going to happen to me? And so sometimes it's like, calm down, it's okay. Like, wait till there's some things to talk about, or you guys are like, have the foundation, you're going to make it through that first part, then do it. So I would say, like, before moving in together, for sure getting married, like, before you get married,
Yeah.
like, absolutely. It's why not? You know what I
Why-
mean? That's when you really talk about like what are our deal breakers? What are we willing to do? I do think it is way more common with people who've been through a divorce to do it because
Mm.
they walk a little more gently, like they don't have that kind of arrogance of youth where it's like, we'll figure it out, we're in love. It's more like, okay, this could go real bad. I don't want to go through that. I don't want you to go through that.
Yeah.
Let's figure it out together. And that's awesome, when people do that.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. I like it. I like it. So another form of therapy that you do is relationship and sex therapy, right?
Mhm.
So there's so many different reasons that both men and women's sex life can be impacted or even non-existent. Sometimes we see that women just feel less desirable as they get older, or they are starting to not look like they used to, and they have difficulty with orgasms and challenges, just talking about sex with their spouse. So what kinds of things do you encounter mostly with those? And what kind of advice, I guess, can we ever not even advice, like just help people to not feel it to be so challenging. Like it's okay. And it doesn't mean the end of the world that you didn't have an orgasm last night. Like that's okay, right? So what kinds of things would you talk about in that area? of expertise.
Wow. Yeah, it's so complicated. Sex is one of those things where people talk about it a lot and say very little. Like, it's like there's
It's so
really
true.
yeah, it's like we say it all the time. We're so fixated on it, and yet very little of what we talk about is useful.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, because it's, and I say that because it's so different, like the reasons, but and there's different reasons. Attachment and sex are really linked.
Mm.
Um, and so, there are differences in desire, of how much sex someone wants, and that's going to change over time. And that's important to look at and be aware of and not have shame about it, but to actually like look at it.
Yeah.
But then there's also these things that can happen in relationships where, if you don't want to have sex with your partner, but you want to have sex, that's something that a lot of people do. But do you still want to in other ways? Or, I mean, sometimes if you're distracted with parenting and you're with the person, sometimes it's easier to just, and that'll be, I think, why sometimes when kids get older, where women are like, you know what, this isn't good enough for me, because they are through that unsexy time of young kids. And they're like, I would like to have sex again with someone I want to have sex with. I do want to
Yeah.
have, and so it's like being aware of what's happening, really digging in, not having shame, but getting curious, and trying to figure out, like, what do I want? Like, and for women, it changed when you were saying about like sexual desire, something that happens when testosterone tends to go down over time, or things happen to that's like your sex seeking hormone. That's, it comes along usually with ovulation, and you're like, oh, it's like, it's us being in heat, basically. We're like, oh, I want to,
Oh,
I need
need
to,
someone.
yeah, exactly. And so sometimes I'll ask clients of like, is it that you don't want sex, you don't enjoy it once you're into it? If they're with like a good partner who's, good at it and they enjoy it, they're like, I just don't think about it. And I'm like, well, that's a hormone thing. It's just because you're not seeking it. It doesn't mean you don't enjoy it. It doesn't mean you can't orgasm. It doesn't mean that and the lack of communication between partners can build those walls. But around looks too, of feeling less desirable, with our body and what we think that someone is looking for. That's a lot of work that we have to do ourselves. Like, what are the beliefs that we have? Or, are we able to evolve and feel sexy? A lot of, so we're taught to like, what do I look like? What do I look like? What do I look like? If I ask a woman, do you feel sexy? 9 times out of 10, she'll say, well, I look like this. And I'm like, that's not what I asked. Do you feel sexy? Do you know what it feels like to feel sexy? Do you, are you in your body? Can you feel sex? Can you show up? Can you be embodied in it? And a lot of women can't. And they just don't feel it. So they get so fixated on what they think the other person's seeing, that they're not showing up and fully feeling it.
Yeah.
And, and the other person, if you're with a man who has like a high level, and I'm making it very like man, woman, but, or a woman that you're with, like if they have a high level of empathy, and, so our mirror neurons allow us to feel something that another person feels. So if you're with someone who can feel things, you being turned on is a turn on to them.
Yes.
Like a partner who cares about you, that's going to be a turn on for them. They're gonna be like, oh, she's into it. But if you're so in your head, how do I look? What's the lighting? Oh God, what's the angle? How does my stomach, like all of that, like you're not in it, they're not in it, and you like lose the moment.
Yeah.
And so,
And how do you get out of that? It's so hard not to get in your head. Or sometimes you're just thinking about, oh, I got to go cook dinner. I, do this. I want to hurry up or whatever, but especially the stuff of not feeling good about yourself. And I remember actually being like that after the, divorce and encountering my first sexual experience after being with somebody for so long that, I'd only been with him. And yeah, it's like, oh, what if he doesn't like me? Or what if I do this wrong? Or, there's just so much stuff going through your head. I don't know how you get out of it. I don't know.
yeah.
Just
No,
time.
I mean, that's work. I think that starts outside the bedroom. It's like, we have to be able to feel sexy when we're not with the person. We have to be able to know what, like, I mean, it's like meditation, yoga.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really cool resources out there for like tantric masturbation. Like, how do you feel good? Do you enjoy your body? And then you go into the sexual encounter also valuing whether you enjoy it or not. And so that
Mm.
changes the dynamic, right? Of like, am I chosen? How does he feel about it? Like that gets you out of your head because you can
Yeah.
enjoy it and be in the moment. And
Yeah.
it's a process. And I there is a lot of, I mean, it varies by culture. I think it's helpful to look at other cultures too. It's like in France, and various cultures, it's like women are not where they're not seen as just vessels for baby making.
Yeah.
Older women are seen as like very sexy. And I think a lot of men actually do see older women as very sexy a lot, for a lot of reasons. And so it's really the stuff we put on ourselves. Or if we're with someone who's looking for being like the little girl, then it's like, you go get that. You do you. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And, I think it's knowing what you bring to it, and
Yeah.
if you fully embodied and appreciating yourself and, if that's what they're looking for, like, sexual pleasure, and you're looking for sexual pleasure and you're looking for like a good experience, like it's way more pleasurable the older you get.
Yeah. And I think the whole thing again goes back to working on yourself, right? And finding, having feeling
Yeah.
the worth in yourself and knowing that you are deserving and all of those good things. And then you start to love yourself and it just blossoms from there. It's really fascinating since I've started, really talking to a lot of people. It does all just culminate from that. It's interesting. And that's what
Exactly.
I think everybody needs to know is just to take the time to really work on yourself and do some research and explore your body and figure out what you do like that's a huge thing. And I'm sure there's a million women that haven't even seen what their vagina looks like. It's like take out the mirror and experiment a little, right?
There's very, very little knowledge that we have of our own bodies and our
Yeah.
own anatomy. And like men don't have that, but we don't have it either, so and it's not for lack of resources,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Back in the day, even, in my childhood, there just was less resources. You pick up a book, like,
Yeah.
what I mean?
And we had
There,
sex ed class. That was it, right? The one talk.
which was mostly like how not to get diseases or pregnant,
Right.
I mean, that's what it was.
This is a penis. This is a
Yeah, yeah. It
vagina.
wasn't anything about like anything, right? But there are so many resources. There's so many, and I really encourage people to dig in. I mean, we're really just scraping the surface of what is possible with sex. I mean,
Yeah.
and culturally, we're now starting to dive into a little bit, but like tantric practices are incredible.
Yeah.
Like, and I think there's a lot of like attachment healing. There's a lot of soothing, co-regulation, being in our body. Like if you have a safe partner, or you can go as a single person and go to them, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And learn that and be in your body. How do I feel this? And it brings up, and part of the reason we're not in our bodies is because maybe there were reasons it didn't feel good to be in our body. And we
Yeah.
need to get in our body and love ourselves. And, that can bring like releases of trauma. That can bring like releases of shame that we have about ourselves or beliefs that we have. And then you're much more free to,
Hmm.
experience multiple orgasms, to
Yeah.
experience, like different levels of pleasure. We barely scrape the surface, and it really takes like a experience and knowledge over time for us to get into like a deep sexuality and a
Yeah.
deep sexual pleasure. And most people don't, because
They
they don't
just
want to talk
don't.
about
Yeah,
it.
that's exactly right. They just don't want to talk about it. And that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing. It's like
Mhm.
taboo. That's why I love to talk about it because I like for people like they don't want to talk about it, but they want to listen. They want to hear about it. They just don't want to talk about it. Right.
Talking about it without, because I'll have like clients that'll be like, "Oh, is this TMI?" I'm like, "Nothing is TMI. We are going to
Right.
talk about all the things." And I think that like the more people talk about it without shame and just
Hmm.
curiosity and just normalize it, and then it's like it frees up someone else, because it's
Yeah.
our own stuff that keeps it shameful. And then,
And that's how
like,
you become more comfortable with yourself, right? When you're really just when you're free to talk about it and be open about it, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't know you liked that I did that. Or you're telling somebody, oh, I like when you do this or that. I mean,
yeah.
it's huge
Yeah.
communication.
The amount of people who do not talk during sex, when you really think about it, it's kind of weird. Like, you know
Yes.
what I mean? Like, we
You're
really
just
like whatever. Not,
silent.
yeah, the silence. Not that you need to be like discussing the news, but part of it of where your mind goes somewhere else is like if your body's there, but you're not engaging your
Mhm.
mind with the person that you're with, that's part of it, right? Like you're going to
Mhm.
be distracted, you're going to be going somewhere else. So it's how do you create a holistic experience where you're meeting that person with your mind as well, and then you're less likely to be doing dishes or doing whatever, so
Yeah.
it takes practice and
Yeah.
experimentation.
But there's
Yeah.
just so many resources out there, like you said, now that people should really invest in that.
Hmm.
So, To kind of tie things up, I noticed on your Instagram, loved it. I went and looked, and I've used so many great little reels and sayings. I kind of found myself, I got lost in there for a little bit, not gonna lie. So one of the reels that really stood out to me was called "This Week You Owe It to Yourself." And you just talked about little things that you can do to just pay attention to yourself for the week. So can you tell us a few of those things that you kind of recommend people do when they just need to take some time and grace and have
Yeah.
that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that something that happens a lot, like when we, for whatever reason, and it's so not helpful, when things get hard or we get busy, then all of a sudden we cut out everything. Oh, I don't have time for this. Oh, I don't have to be good to myself. Oh, I don't have time. I have to like that is the opposite, you know? And so what do you need to be the best that you can be? If you're going through a hard time, don't just like shut off and push through. Say to myself, like, okay, if I'm, like it's helpful to think of like a physical perspective. If I'm going to run a marathon, I'm not going to be like, I'm going to eat crap or not eat at all. And I'm not going to do anything. Like we don't do that. So why do we
Yeah.
look at life as like an endurance thing of like, I'm just going to like, just go through, power through it. Like life is hard. Don't make it harder. So like, I ask people like, what are your non-negotiable things? Is it sleep? Is it food? Is it connecting with somebody and talking to them? Is it like, how do you get ahead of every day? Taking the time for you, doing like the deeply restful, deeply nourishing things so that when you do approach whatever comes up, you do it from a place of strength. Because I mean, we think, oh, we don't have time. But what ends up happening if we don't do that, we end up tuning out at the end of the day, scrolling or watching TV. We take not deeply restful time out. We just crash and it's too late for us to do planned. So, it's like, how do you do this? Think of it as your vitamins. What are your self-care vitamins? And a lot of times people think of self-care as like, I just take a nap or I go on vacation or I do a bubble bath. And it's like, no, think of it as like different vitamins. Think about like what might get depleted this week. Am I going to be doing really boring, laborious stuff that I'm having to do? And it's just going to make me feel like, meh. Okay, you need an inspiration vitamin. So why don't you do something artistic? Or why don't you, go to like an art gallery or connect with someone who like inspires you? You need that. Or if you're like going into a tough motherhood, like day, and you're like, oh, like, again, I don't feel sexy. I don't feel this. I don't feel that. Okay. The vitamin that you need is feeling sexy, feeling cherished, feeling like you value as a human being. And you're not just, a vending machine for your littles to push the buttons and get things from you, because that's what they're meant to do. But then we're replenish ourselves, so I think like having a more nuanced way of looking at it. Sometimes we don't need a nap and a break. What we need is to be inspired, encouraged. We need a hug. We need, someone to do something for us, when we're taking care of everybody else. Sometimes having someone do something for you that you could do for yourself, but it feels good to just be like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
This one thing, I could do it, but it makes me feel good when you do it. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's really knowing yourself. Like you're saying, love languages. We have self-love language, and so thinking about like, what does feed me? Am I a touch person? Then I need to get lots of hugs, and or a massage, or something to feel in my body. Am I a words of affirmation person? Then, like
I need to go walk past a construction worker.
Yeah. Encourage me. Also, when they're going through a hard time, when they're pushing themselves, create like a brag book, right? Anytime someone sends you like an email or a letter, you're so amazing, you're so great, keep it, put it somewhere. When you're having a down day, read through all the things people have said about you to remind
that.
Yeah. And those words, but we store them up. When we forget them, we need to like be reminded. So
I think that's really big. Just have grace and just, it's okay. It's okay. Right. It's not the end of the world. And you just got to take time for yourself. That's really huge. So I love having you here. Thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell everybody like where they can find you? If they want to do some courses with you or schedule a session with you, let us know.
Yeah. So online, it's www.mythrivepsychology.com. And so it's a group practice. We see people, 40 plus states at this point.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. So pretty much any state that you're in, see you. Online, let's see, I looked up my handles. It's Thrive Psychology Group on Instagram. We're on YouTube. I've tried to put a lot of videos on YouTube to just educational. Facebook. So Thrive Psychology Group.
Thrive Psychology Group. Perfect. So before you go, I like to do a little fun facts for Mrs. to Ms. This or that question. So I have 10 questions. They're relationship driven, and you just say whichever one appeals to you. That's all. Number one, would you rather have an adventurous date exploring a new city together or a cozy night in with a homemade dinner and a movie?
Oh, gosh. Adventurous date. I'll say adventurous.
That sounds good. Number two, a long-term commitment or a spontaneous romance?
Ooh, can I have one inside the other?
Sure.
Yeah, a long-term commitment where I date my spouse.
Oh, I like that. Would you rather date someone who shares all your hobbies and interests but has different values, or someone with similar values but few shared interests?
Shared values, different interests, because then I can learn things, but you need to be aligned on the values.
Agreed. You can do your interests by yourself, right? Number four, freedom with limited connection or deep connection with compromises?
Oh, these are tough.
I know, I am reading going, gosh, I hit you with the hard ones.
Yeah, it is. Gosh.
They're all kind of a mixture, right? Like you want a little bit of all of it. Like.
No, I want freedom here. This reminds me of something that my husband had said to me, and I'm actually went through a divorce as well. And with my second husband, something he said when we first got together is, I'm like, are you worried that I'm going to leave? He said, I'm worried you're going to stay. He's like, if you're ever unhappy, leave me in a heartbeat. Do it, because I love you and I want you to be happy more than I want you to own you or be with you. Wow. And that was so sexy. I'm like, you don't even know how sexy that was, right? So for me, it's the freedom, knowing I have the freedom to go, but that I don't want to, because it's so much better with him.
Oh,
so I guess it's kind of the both, but I think he really captured it on that one. Like, oh, that's so hot.
What a guy. I like it.
Yeah.
I want one. Number five, would you rather have an unforgettable first date, but no second date, or just a mediocre first date, but that leads to a long-term relationship?
The second one. I mean, I would rather have the long-term, as long as that's not mediocre.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to pick it up
with a rough first date. Absolutely.
Yeah. You had one shot. Pick it up. Number six, spontaneous makeout sessions or planned candlelight dinners?
Oh my goodness. Don't we want it all? That's the thing. I guess the spontaneous makeout sessions, if I had to pick one or the other.
Yeah. I'm making you pick. Number seven, a comfortable routine or adventurous spontaneity?
Oh, that was easy. Adventure spontaneity. It's just personality. Yeah.
Number eight, trying new positions or mastering the old ones?
Oh boy. Again, both. But if I had to pick one or the other, I suppose try new ones.
Yeah.
I guess, as long as I get to master them.
Right. I think it's sometimes we can get a little carried away with the trying new ones, because you're always like having to up the ante, right? So you're thinking, oh, we got to do something different. We got to do something different, instead of enjoying sometimes what you have.
I like that. I mean, sex can be like improv. If you know your partner, it's like yes and then you're in that good chemistry sexual relationship. You're like, whoa, did we just invent something new? It's like the spontaneous.
I didn't know you could move like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one can lead. Mastery of the old can sometimes do something and you're like, oh, that's new. There's always these new things that you make together that you never done with someone else, that like,
yeah, throwing a little something new in with the old. I like that. Number nine, slow dancing in the living room or spontaneous dance moves in the kitchen?
Oh, slow dancing in the living room.
Yeah. And number 10, tease to build anticipation or straight for the fireworks?
Tease.
Yeah. Depends on the amount of time you got, I guess.
True. I just
got a good time for this. Let's just
fireworks. Yeah, as long as it's tease with no fireworks, that would be depressing. But if it's tease with all the better fireworks, then you got like day long foreplay, weeks long foreplay.
That's it. Foreplay is so underrated. Foreplay is so fun, so good.
Mhm. So
Well,
true.
thank you once again for joining me, Dr. Charlynn. It was so great to have you here and wonderful conversation and very real. And I just love the information that you give to the audience. So thank you for that. And I hope you guys are all tuning in and got some great information. You can find her and all the information that she said already. And I will also put it in the description of the episode when it airs. So you can look forward to that. Thank you once again for joining me. You can find me on any social media platform at from.mrs.to.ms. You can email me with any questions, concerns, suggestions at info@fromMrs.to.ms.net. And I will get right back to you. So have a great week, you guys. We'll talk soon. Bye.